Hey everyone, welcome to your exam prep explainer on the history of medicine. If you're currently gearing up for your junior cycle history exam, well, you're in exactly the right place. So let's just dive right into this masterclass, shall we? We're going to be tracing the literally incredible journey of human health, all the way from ancient, superstitions, right up to modern surgical miracles. All right, to kick things off, we need to define a massive key term from your syllabus, a pattern of change. Now, this simply means how changes occur in a particular area of history over a period of time. It's kind of like a giant puzzle. Figuring out how to keep people healthy and how to fix them when they're not has been this constant driving obsession for humanity. And today, we are mapping out that exact pattern of change. So, here's the game plan for today's masterclass. We'll be conquering 5 major historical eras: ancient and medieval medicine, Renaissance anatomical breakthroughs, germ theory and vaccines, 20th century medical marvels, and finally, the evolution of healthcare. Let's step right into section 1, ancient and medieval medicine. Okay, so we're traveling way back to a time when illness was this absolute mystery. It was terrifyingly misunderstood and completely out of human control. For your exams, here's a crucial name you absolutely have to remember: Hippocrates of Kos. He's widely known as the father of medicine. Living in ancient Greece, this guy was a total trailblazer. Why? Because he was literally the very first person to write down detailed descriptions of different diseases, illnesses, and their symptoms. He actually attempted to diagnose patients based on what he was seeing with his own eyes. Now, you might be wondering why this is such a big deal. Well, it represents a massive historical shift. Throughout ancient history, when people couldn't explain why someone got sick, they just blamed it on divine beings. They viewed illness as a literal punishment from the gods. But Hippocrates, he totally changed the game. He believed in natural causes. Specifically, he thought sickness was caused by an imbalance of the 4 humors, basically 4 liquids in the body: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Now, sure, this was later proven to be completely false, but at the time, it was a revolutionary step toward actual science. All right, time for a quick pop quiz to keep you on your toes. Moving into the Roman Empire, a physician named Galen heavily influenced medicine, and he correctly figured out that understanding anatomy was absolutely essential to treating the human body. But what was the massive problem with Galen's approach to understanding human organs? Think about it for a second. Well, if you guessed that he couldn't actually study human bodies, you hit the nail on the head. Because human dissection was strictly banned back then, Galen had to experiment on and dissect animals instead. He just kind of assumed human bodies were built exactly the same way. And because of that, Galen reached several totally false conclusions about our organs. That mistake led to doctors treating people incorrectly for over 1,000 years, which is wild, especially considering they actually had some surprisingly advanced surgical tools for the era. Fast forward to the Middle Ages and, well, things get a little bit gruesome. Because medieval doctors were still relying on Hippocrates' flawed 4 humors theory, their treatments were entirely focused on balancing out those bodily fluids. So, if you got sick, you might be facing bleeding to let out excess blood, or cupping with hot metal to draw fluids to the surface, maybe leeching to suck the blood right out, or, in really severe cases, outright amputation. Combine all of that with some terribly unhygienic living conditions, and I think we can all be super glad we don't live in the 14th century. Moving right along to section 2, Renaissance anatomical breakthroughs. So, during the Reformation in the early 16th century, the Catholic Church's power was reduced. And this was a huge deal because it finally allowed doctors in Protestant countries to dissect actual human corpses. You're going to want to lock these 2 rule-breaking figures into your memory for the exam. First, Andreas Vesalius. He dissected human corpses, published these incredibly detailed drawings of internal organs, and finally proved Galen's ancient animal-based theories wrong. Meanwhile, you have William Harvey, who dissected live animals to prove that the heart, not the liver, pumped blood in a circulating system all around the body. Real game changers. And that brings us to section 3, germ theory and vaccines. Okay, so for literally centuries, doctors genuinely believed diseases were spread by miasmas, which is really just a fancy word for bad air. But then, the invention of the single-lens microscope by Anton von Leeuwenhoek in the 1670s changed absolutely everything. It revealed these tiny, invisible microorganisms that were actually causing the diseases. So look at the heavy hitters of the 19th century, who took that microscopic discovery and used it to save millions of lives. Louis Pasteur proved that germs actually cause disease and sour milk. milk. Then Robert Koch took it a step further by identifying the specific bacteria causing deadly illnesses like anthrax, cholera, and tuberculosis. And of course, Edward Jenner developed the first ever vaccine for smallpox. And Jenner's work was honestly astonishing. Back in 1796, he noticed that milkmaids didn't seem to catch smallpox. So he bravely, and maybe a bit controversially, infected an 8-year-old boy with cowpox, which was a much milder disease. And it worked. It successfully prompted the boy's immune system to fight off the deadlier smallpox later on. Jenner's breakthrough totally paved the way for a massive rollout of life-saving vaccines over the next century and a half, protecting us against things like typhoid, TB, polio, and measles. Understanding germs didn't just lead to vaccines. It completely revolutionized public health and hospitals, too. Just look at Florence Nightingale's hospital ward during the Crimean War. Notice how clean, bright, and well-ventilated it is? Once doctors finally connected the dots between germs on unwashed hands and the shockingly high death rates, especially for mothers during childbirth, things changed. Hygiene, basic hand washing, and the sterilization of medical equipment became the new standard. And because of that, mortality rates absolutely plummeted. We now arrive at Section 4, 20th Century Medical Marvels. During this era, fueled by some massive government and corporate investments, human life expectancy and quality of life increased more dramatically than at literally any other time in history. Let's do a quick rapid-fire review, starting with the massive explosion of pharmaceutical drugs. Through really careful experimentation, manufactured medications started changing everyday life. We saw the extraction of insulin in the 1920s, which finally allowed patients to control diabetes, and the widespread availability of everyday painkillers, like aspirin, to help manage chronic pain. But listen up, if there is one single medication you absolutely must know for your exam, it's penicillin. Discovered completely by accident in some mold by Alexander Fleming in the 1920s, penicillin became the world's very first antibiotic. It was, and honestly still is, used to treat a vast array of bacterial infections that, before this discovery, would have pretty much been a guaranteed death sentence. Surgery also took a massive leap into the future. With the discovery of blood types right before World War I, safe blood transfusions finally became possible. Then, the invention of X-rays and MRI scanners allowed doctors to actually see inside the body without even having to cut it open. And miraculously, doctors began replacing failing organs with healthy ones. From the very first successful kidney transplant in 1954 to heart transplants in 1967. I mean, what was once pure science fiction literally became surgical reality. The 20th century also completely transformed women's health and reproductive medicine. Painkillers like epidurals helped ease childbirth, while ultrasound and IVF gave a lot of new hope to families. And crucially, the invention of the contraceptive pill in the 1960s by Pincus and Rock allowed women to actually control their fertility. Because pregnancies could now be planned, women gained unprecedented access to higher education and the workforce, which radically impacted global society as a whole. And finally, we reach Section 5, the evolution of healthcare. Now, all these amazing treatments are wonderful, right? But they don't mean much if regular people can't actually get access to them. So here's our final pop quiz question to test your historical understanding. How exactly did access to healthcare improve during the 20th century? Like, how did we get these incredible breakthroughs out of the fancy labs and into the homes of everyday people? Well, the answer lies in the creation of the welfare state. Accelerating super rapidly after World War II, governments all across Europe started rolling out these massive social programs. For the first time in history, quality healthcare, prescription medicines, and hospital access were made freely available, or at least highly subsidized. This effectively removed that terrifying cost barrier that had plagued sick people since ancient times. All right, let's bring this all together now. We have traced an absolutely incredible pattern of change today. Humanity has gone from blindly blaming the gods for a simple fever, to suffering through medieval bloodletting, to finally mapping out human anatomy, conquering microscopic germs with vaccines, and literally transplanting beating human hearts. It's just a stunning story of scientific triumph that has drastically improved our quality of life. As we wrap up this masterclass, I want to leave you with a thought that goes a bit beyond your textbook. We've conquered so much in the past 2,000 years. But as we continue to push the boundaries of science, curing the incurable and mastering the human body, what unpredictable new challenges do you think the next century of medicine is going to bring? Keep studying, keep asking questions, and hey, good luck on those exams.